Well, thank you all for coming today to the Blanden Art Museum. It's really great to see so many people here in support of an area regional artist. We've got a fantastic quilt exhibit by Joanne Alberda. Amazing quilts inspired by a visit to a town out in Montana, and I'll let her kind of get into that a little bit more. But first off, I'd like to say one great way to find out what's going on at the museum is to become a member of the museum. There's many ways that you can do that. We've got membership access online. You just go online and fill out the membership form there. Or we have pamphlets downstairs on the front desk. And so that's a really great way to stay in the loop of what's happening here, because when you become a member, you get postcards sent to you about the exhibits that are happening, and on the postcards have information about the receptions. We also have, we put together a quarterly publication that gets sent out to all the members as well, and in there has information about the upcoming exhibits, also all of our wonderful art classes. And so if you're an individual that wants to expand their artistic knowledge, or maybe dabble in creativity as a kind of a hobby or something extra, we've got some amazing art classes set up for this spring and summer at our brand new Art Education Center, which is just down the road. And we have a magnificent art educator that has developed all these classes, and she teaches most of the classes that we have. We do invite artists in every now and then, and so if that's something that interests you, please check that out as well. The other way to keep informed about what's happening here at the museum is to become, follow us on Facebook, become a friend on Facebook. We post a lot of things on Facebook, not only the upcoming classes, but exhibit information and kind of spontaneous activities that we do throughout the week. So again, those are really two great ways. And then lastly, you know, we do have a website, and you can check on the website. There's a lot more exhibit information there, and you can find a lot of information that I'm talking about right now all on our website. And so those are really three great ways to not only help support the museum, but also stay in the loop of what's going on as well. Also too, I want to mention that, you know, mark your calendars. June 8th is when we have our annual Blanden Art Festival. And so this is a community event. It's free to attend. And we have artists that come and sell their artwork. We have music going on. We have food vendors. We have kid activities. It's really kind of for the community. It's a great time. And so mark your calendars, June 8th, 9 o'clock till 4. And so that is all the commercials that you'll hear from me until the end, because I'll probably go through them again. I got to leave you with something. So thank you. So again, about the exhibit, I just want to mention really briefly that it was a couple of years ago when I was actually asked to be a juror for a jury show at the McKnighter, which is in Mason City. And while I was there, I noticed this wonderful little exhibit of these beautiful quilts. And so I jotted down her name, and I think within that same week I contacted Joanne and asked her if she'd be interested in having the show here. She said yes, and here it is. And so I always say, you never know, you know, I'm always out looking for the next artist that I want to bring back to the Fort Dodge community and share them with all of you. And so Joanne is a really fantastic artist. The quilts are amazing, and the stories behind them are even better. And so with that, let's welcome Joanne up, and she'll tell you all about it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, that's good. I may need that. That's great. So I'd love to tell you the story of how this show came to be. The first quilts that I made for this, and I didn't call it Tales from a Ghost Town yet at that time, but it was in 2012. And I made 5 small ones. That one framed one in the middle and that framed one over there were part of that. And, but just prior to that, there is the story of how that came to be. After we retired, well, I should say my husband and I both grew up in Montana. And my father was a potato farmer, and he's long gone, of course, and then my brother had it, and now my nephew has it, and his son, going down the generations. So after we retired, then my husband, Will, needed something to do in the fall. He went out there to drive a potato truck, hauling potatoes from the field to the pit. And then, if it rained, we could work, so then we would take off. Well, we decided to go to Virginia City. Now, I hadn't been to Virginia City for years. Virginia City is about 90 miles from where we lived. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong, right? Well, 45, what is it? It's not that far. Well, okay. Anyway, we decided to go there. It was a place that we used to go when we were kids because at night, in the summertime, these colleges would come in there and they would do melodramas. And of course, they're so much fun to watch. But that's all we went there for. I really didn't care that much about the ghost town there, the leftover remnants of this mining town. But when we come back, 50 years later, you look at everything with different eyes. But what was so interesting is that it was raining, and that's why we had the day off. When wood is wet, it is so gorgeous. And so I had always liked photographing details. Anyway, I got started photographing this wood. And like, for instance, that picture over there, the middle one framed, that was the bottom of an old building there that was rotting away at the bottom. So it was just fun looking at these things. And that was a board that had a big funny crack in it. And so I had these photographs in my mind. And then over the years, I have gone to a workshop in Columbus, Ohio called the Surface Design Symposium, Quilt Surface Design Symposium, where we did a lot of dyeing fabrics, printing fabrics, making fabrics, if you want to say that way. And then we have workshops where we take our fabrics and try what are we going to do with them. And that's when I looked at these fabrics that I had made, and I should say, I did not make all the fabrics in here because there was a vendor there that made beautiful fabrics, hand-dyed fabrics, and she taught me a lot, but I purchased some of her fabrics, and so some of her fabrics are in here too. But anyway, I loved that fabric, and somehow I thought that this fabric and these wood images would really work well together. And so I started creating this, and I did a series of 5 of those, which I was hooked. That was in 2002. And then from there, I would say about every year I would do 1 or 2 pieces. I started working on these large pieces. I would do one of those a year. And I would say in 2015, I did this large piece, and it was based on a photograph. I had this photograph that I used. And I had this funny little image right here that was in the fabric, and I wanted to keep that, but somehow when we got that there, that's when I first thought, oh, that's my ghost. And then all these things became ghost tales from a ghost town. And so that's where the ghost story comes from. Anyway, those I have a picture there that I took from on top of the hill looking down on the town, and you can look at that closer later on. But when we would walk around, behind those buildings too was all these shacks where these miners lived. And there was one section that was really bad, was just where the Chinese miners lived. There's a whole history of these Chinese workers that built railroads and anyway, they worked there too. They probably did most of the dirty work. But, so there was just a lot of wood to photograph. I guess when I looked at that wood, what I saw was all these lines and cracks that came through. And to me, that represented the stitching lines. And that kind of became my standard stitch line, was these cracks in the wood. So I also photographed some of the shingled roofs that were there. And so those are some of the last pieces that I've made. I did that one first. And if you know anything about finger painting, that's really how I made those. I took the dye and put it on a piece of glass and used my fingers or other little tools laying around to make something, laid the fabric on it, picked it up. And that's how I got my designs. And then I would cut those up and rearrange those. I know when I did that one, I decided to do some dark and lighter ones to try and get an even gradation that moved across the piece. And it's kind of interesting, if you've ever tried that, and you have a piece of glass and you take a roller and roll the die on it. And then if you take I used a lot of different tools, but the most fun was it was an old credit card, and you take it and just kind of squiggle it down. And probably a good shingle doesn't have that many squiggles in it, but I couldn't help myself. This little series right here is interesting. I call these tall tales. You've heard of Paul Bunyan, haven't you?
Sure.
And his tall tales, how he created a ball out of interesting things. I was messing around with my photography, and I have Photoshop elements. And I'm just going to say this: if you don't use this, it doesn't mean anything. But if you do use it, you might be interested in it. There's a program on there that will take a picture and just swirl it around. And I made a book here of all the pieces that I had done so far. I've done some additional ones that are not in here now. So I'm going to have to make another book. But I was going to show you the images here. This is the photograph. And then using that Photoshop element, I could make this with it just by pressing a button.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no big deal, really. I had tried that on all kinds of things, thought it was really cool, and then after I looked at it a while, I didn't like it. But when I did it with wood, it was like I created something new, and I liked those. And now I have since made a whole book of plates and balls and bowls. You could play with them just a little bit. But then I tried doing some little quilted pieces that were inspired by those. So if you look at those, there's a little section of those. I have lots of those. Let's see what's talked about these images right here. The top one, I have a beautiful big quilt that goes with that, but you ran out of room. And this one here is the inspiration for that piece there. And I was just talking to some people, that large piece over there, I started with a black background, and then I cut all those shapes out of some of the fabric, mostly leftover fabric pieces that I had, and put those on there. I had Wonder Under, it's a fabric adhesive that you put on to the back of the fabric. You cut it out and then you just iron it on. And that would be okay that way, but then it's stitched very heavily to hold everything on there. And that makes it pretty sturdy. The red one over there is, at the time I made that one, it was when they had all these big fires in California that one summer. I think all the artists I knew were making fire pictures. I had to make one too. And now I want to say a little bit about those blue pieces back there. Maybe you think they don't quite fit. But they do, really. Have you ever heard of Clifford Still? Yes? No. Clifford Still is an artist from the 50s, 60s, that area. And interesting story about him, he got into a real tangle with museums that wanted to show his work. He refused to show his work unless you showed at least 6 of his pieces, because he felt one piece didn't tell the whole story. And he was so adamant about that, that finally he just didn't want to have anything to do with them. And so for the last 20 years of his life, he just worked quietly in his big studio, didn't say anything. And then in his will, he offered his artwork to any city that would build a museum and house only his work. That work could never be sold, it had to be maintained. That was his will. And it took about 10 years, and finally Denver bit. And they bought it and built a museum right next to the Denver Art Museum. Anyway, that's where I first saw the opening show. And he had this one beautiful big blue quilt in there that I just fell in love with that color. And so I asked a friend of mine, you know, what dye she knew about that quilt. And she said, you don't have to worry about that, because she said Kona Fabrics makes that blue. And so now I have ended up with actually 2 different blues, and both times I thought I was buying the Kona blue that was that, but I see they're not the same, but at any rate. So I used that blue, but in that show he had this big blue quilt with a big black line right down the center. Now that sounds pretty minimal. I don't know if you would like it or not, but I think it was the color that did it. But I know that looking at it, my first thought was, oh, but this would be so much more beautiful if it was quilted. And so that's why I got that. But when I got that fabric, I felt like I had to do something with it. I poured some black dye over it. I stitched the blue fabric, first of all, I should say, onto a frame. And then I poured that blue fabric, that black dye on there. I was trying to get these burn marks like that. I don't think I was totally successful, but some of it wasn't too bad. And then instead of a black line, I decided to use some kind of orangey red lines in there to give it some contrast. And then, because I called it my Clifford Still quilt, but I quilted it. And I wish I could show him, but of course he's long gone. Anyway, those 2 quilts, that one and that one. Now, that one over there I think is interesting, because I didn't get this idea from him necessarily. And now the name escapes me of the guy who did that, but he has these, maybe you can help me out, Eric. He does these little tiny strips in his arbor. Who was that?
Bartlett Newman?
Pardon?
Newman?
Was it Newman?
The big things with like a...
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was.
Zips.
And zips. And he put that, and so I had that blue and black, and I thought it needs some zips. And it was interesting because I was teaching art history at the time at Dordt College, where I was teaching. I was teaching that class, and that was the other thing that was interesting. I could mention that too if you have time to look through the first part of this book. But you know, you think about that, those buildings down there in that picture of the ghost town, there's more to that ghost town than just those buildings. But what I saw was crenellated roof lines. I saw Gothic doorways and windows. I saw Roman arches. I saw all the Greek pillars. These people who were coming there to search for gold were not just some ignorant, gold-hungry person. They were people who had traveled the world. They knew what they were doing. I don't think many of them found as much gold as they thought they were going to. But at any rate, I just thought it was interesting that on these old buildings falling apart, here you saw this whole history in there as well. So it was interesting for me on a lot of levels to visit that place as a grown-up rather than as a kid. And so over the years, I just keep plugging away. I've been working on this for about 12 years, and I think I have well over 20 pieces, well, more if you count all of those separately. And it's been a great experience. I also do other things besides Tales from a Ghost Town, but this, I think, is my best, most cohesive show. So thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, I would love to answer them for you or help you. Yes?
How long did it take you to make this quote over here?
You know, somebody else just asked me that question, and the thing about any quilt like that, I started that in a master class one time where, you know, you have to come and decide what you want to do, and so I had an idea. I had this photograph, and I was trying to think about that, so I had it up there for a week, and I had a lot of things in there, but I remember tearing a lot of stuff off and changing things around. What am I going to do? How am I going to make this? I think I felt like this end was pretty busy, so I didn't want that end to be that busy. I wanted it to be quieter. And I know I struggled with the right side of that one. So, you know, that was up for a week. Then when I got home, I put it up on the board. And I have to tell you that this piece, I cut boards of black fabric. They were, I think, 12 inches wide. And I just had those laying on there. Because usually when I do a big quilt like that, I work it up in sections. And, but they were all right next to each other, so I could keep going. And finally, you know, it probably would be up there a week or two, and I'd probably go down every day and change something and sit on the step and look at it for a long time. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. How do you measure time there? But then finally, once I decide that, okay, this is it, then I think I quilted each of those boards, and then I sewed those boards together. And then on the back, you have to put a piece of binding on there to hold it, and then bind the whole thing. So, yes.
That piece in the corner with the, looks like stones or rock,
Yes.
and then the black section left. That's, I mean, that's, it almost looks, the rocks almost look like a photograph. So
Yeah, it you know, and the thing is, this is a kind of dime where I had a yard of fabric, and you hold it on this end, and then, you know, hold up one corner and just kind of push it down, and then wrap some string around it. And then you start dyeing it. And these dark pieces would have been on the lighter, on the top edges. And you would have just, I think I poured several colors. You could see how kind of just did some strips around it. Anyway, then finally, you never know what you're going to get. And so you open it up, and first you look at it and you think, oh, do I like that? You know, and always, because sometimes you have an idea in your mind and it isn't. I can tell you for sure it will never be like that. And so it comes out. But what I noticed when I stood away from it is that it looked so three-dimensional.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's why I did not cut this piece up. I didn't want to cut it up. And so, and it was just fun because this was about the time I was starting to do free motion quilting. Do you know what that is? You drop the feed dogs on your machine and you just move the fabric around. Wear a pair of gloves and it just moves it around. And I made a lot of little kind of leaf-like forms on there because that was the first thing that came. That was easy for me to do. But then, you know, this little part here was taken from one of the images, and I didn't do it on this one. I have another one that's similar to this, and I did put it on there. It's a ring right there because this was kind of the place where they hitched their horses. And so that's how that piece came to be.
When you mentioned your stitching patterns, I was wondering about did it evolve? Because I noticed the circular stitching patterns. When I first saw those, it would remind me of cross sections of a tree, like the rings, which is really neat. The more straight versus the more
I do a lot of 12-inch square quilts because they're very marketable. And I usually sell at the Artisans Road Trip, which is in October at Okoboji. And that size is a good size for me to try to market. Because when I got there, they said, find something that is between $50 and $100. So I had to think, what can I do at that price? And that was a good exercise for me because I can really whip these out. And actually, I didn't whip these out so fast because I had a bunch of them laying out on the table and I worked on them for quite a while, just trying to mess with them and see what would work because I didn't know exactly what I wanted with them either. But anyway, so I do this, and you know, when you start around there, if you just use the edge of your foot, you can go around. The other thing you have to do is I really have to wander under this background fabric to the batting so that it won't move when I go in that one direction. This is the kind of stitching actually this was a little different because before I put these things together, I stitched each one separately. And so then I just butted them up together and did a wide zigzag to hold them together. And then I put these little strips on here to cover the zigzag. Just a little technical stuff for people who like to know that sort of stuff.
So for instance, those little strips of blackens that hold it together or accentuated, are those held on by the wonder under too, or do you fold them under?
No, they're put on by wonder under. I had a class with a woman whose name was Sue Benner. She opened up a whole new world for me, wonder under. And suddenly I could do curves and everything else. If I had to piece something like this, which I know people who would, I wouldn't sell it for $500 because it would take forever to do that. That's so hard to do. And you know, if I were Picasso at this age, I'd be something, although Picasso was good at whipping things out and getting a really great price for them anyway, so. But anyway, so that's how that's done. It's wonder under, just to have fast, and I can reach a whole different market level. And to me, I like to sell my work to people because you know, these little things in a frame like that can really pop out. Yeah.
Here.
Oh, yes.
Like how long would it take like the one over there for someone like a ghost?
Oh, this one here.
How long would it take you to make that?
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
right there.
this one, it's kind of like that one there. It took me a week, I will say, to get it laid out and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. First, you have to gather your materials and see what looks good together. And then you have to think, I did have a photograph for this too, that kind of, it was dark in the center, got light on this edge, and it had this funny knot in the wood here. And this was kind of fun because when I made this, that's when I saw the ghost. And this became ghost town. But what's so interesting in these pictures too, like along the top of this one here are the nails. And all of a sudden I thought, I gotta put nails in these pieces. So all those little dots, and then I put a little sliver of black alongside of them to give a little shadow so that they pop a little bit. But it was fun to put those things in. I have to tell you the story about this. So I entered this into Quilt National. I had it all finished, and then I looked at the directions one more time, and it said no quilt may have one dimension longer than 100 inches. And this thing was 104 inches.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, it had already been accepted. They didn't know about the extra 4 inches. And so I took 2 inches out of here, and I'm not quite sure where I took it out, but I think it might have been right in between there that I took those 2 inches out and sewed the thing back together. And it meant the hardest part was taking the binding loose and getting that back in there the way it should be. But if there's a will, there's a way.
So like that piece, did you quilt in sections again?
Yes, I did.
Together?
I think I was in, I think at least in 5 sections. And
I just wondered if you had a long arm that you could use.
yeah, no, I don't have a long arm. And I kind of love to have one, but I'm too old now. I'm getting there, let's put it. I have a good friend who's a long arm, but you know, I don't know if a long arm would satisfy me. You know, I've asked them several times, can it go just back and forth like that? And they said, it goes this way just fine, but it doesn't go this way
Go back,
so
yeah.
well. And so I just figure maybe a long arm is for somebody else, not for me. Okay, go ahead.
Is that one in that corner, are those small squares, are they all individually made and then assembled?
Yeah, I think that was taken from 2 different pieces of fabric. And when you cut them apart and reassemble them, then you get these really wonderful edges, you know, where the 2 come together. And I think that's what makes it so much fun. But I love this one fabric because it has some light spots in it. It almost looks like light there. And, you know, I didn't have enough fabric to put a square in each one, and I'm so glad I didn't because I think that wouldn't have helped it at all. But anyway, it looks like reflections, just maybe that. And I don't know, this one was kind of with some leftover pieces, but this piece down here, I just thought, this looks like a good one for me to practice free motion quilting with. And so I did that, and then I ended up putting those 2 pieces together. And I just called it a study because it, you know, wasn't really going anywhere, but when I got done with it, I kind of liked it. Yes?
You talked about your use of dyes on fabric. Have you ever used bleach on fabric?
Yes, I have. I don't have an example here, but I have. I mean, I've done quite a bit of discharge dyeing. I took several of these workshops working with, and that's just an enormous amount of fun. So are you working with dyes too?
Yeah, casually.
Okay. Yeah. No, bleach does wonderful things. Bleach we always started with black. And you put bleach on it, and as I remember, we had 3 different kinds of bleach. One of them was just Clorox. And the other kind I'd have to order, so I wouldn't use those, I would just use Clorox. But it was so interesting because blacks are made by layering colors. That's how they get this rich black. So if you put a discharge on there, you get other colors that come through. Often it will be some kind of a rust color, so I have a lot of that. But what was interesting, this was at the time I was doing it, I don't know if it's true today, we all loved Walmart's black because it would bleach out to a nice light ecru color. And so I've done quite a bit of work with that. It's very nice.
I see eyes, balls over there. I mean, it's fun, you know, because,
Okay, yeah,
yeah, it's just fun to ask people, what do you see?
yeah, right,
Right.
that's good. A lot of people see
Yeah,
things.
what do you see?
Oh, that's interesting.
And like, yeah, like you're looking through even, what do you, when you look down through, telescope?
Yeah.
Or kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
Kaleidoscope.
Yeah, kaleidoscope even, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can stand alone, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
know they don't have to be together.
No,
Those work well.
but they're, yeah.
They're all stand by themselves.
When you did art history, was there a favorite period or artist that you always loved doing? You said you were an art teacher,
Yes, yes. Well, you know, I think,
Stand behind the microphone.
oh, okay. I think, well, Clifford Still and all the artists around him. So help me name some of these.
Say, who did you say again?
Clifford Still.
This, okay, interesting.
And because the names are not coming.
Well, like Barnett Newman, you know,
Yeah,
a lot of
Barnett
those New York,
Newman, and
those
those,
big first New York artists that
Yes.
came right before.
Right.
Like,
Abstract
yeah,
expressionists.
yeah.
So
Riley.
what were those years?
That would be 50s,
Yeah,
starting in the
50s,
40s,
yeah.
50s, 60s, and into the 70s. And I think the reason I like them is their work can easily be thought of in terms of the dyes, the fabric that I dye. I think there's just a connection there. I often collect images of that period and look at them, Helen Frankenthaler's big dyed areas. And I always look at them and think, but they'd see so much better now if they were just quilted and stitched. See, I'm not going to copy anybody, I just will improve what they do.
Well, the stitches add.
They do.
They really do.
Really, that it's a whole another level
Almost a dimension, yeah.
of the art form, you know, making the design. And it's, you know, once I have it all made and I like it and I look at it and I think, now what am I going to do with it? You know, how am I going to quilt it? Am I going to ruin it? But I have never had it that I felt like I ruined it after I quilted it. I always loved it.
Question. So have you ever made a quilt that didn't lock itself into the traditional square or rectangle? Have you done things where you know, where you
I have done,
shifted?
not a lot, but yes, I have done some very interesting free-formed shaped ones. And there's some other art quilters out there who I really admire. One of them is Nancy Crow. Maybe some of you have heard her. And her stuff is very bright. And I don't know why I have not tended to be bright. I just am dull.
Oh, these aren't dull at all.
I like muted things, but anyway, I have always admired her work, and it's interesting because she works in a very traditional manner, but is very much not traditional. And so she has some really nice free-form shapes, and so I like to do that too.
Is she more primary colors? Like reds and blues?
Yeah, she likes red and blue, and she likes black, but bright colors. And she mostly uses solid colors. So you know, in the last couple of years now, I thought, you know, I need to try something new, and this is how things start. We had a nice quilt shop in town, but the lady wanted to retire, and so she sold it. And the woman who bought it did not know how to run a quilt shop. And so it went downhill, so it closed. And so then there was a sale. And I bought, about $400 worth of solid fabrics, because I thought, I want to work with some solid fabrics. And so I've just made a whole bunch of things with those, and it's been fun. It's been fun, but now when I look at them, I don't think they're as strong as this work is. To me, I sometimes try to judge a work like that I've made. I look at it, I made it 20 years ago. Do I still like it, or is it tied to what everybody was doing 20 years ago, and now that's sort of passé? So I don't want to do that. I want to make something that I think will have a good long life. And so I don't know what to think about these. I have about, I think, a dozen pieces. So we'll see once. I hope I live long enough to decide whether they're any good or not. Okay.
Any other questions for Joanne?
Yeah.
She's been an inspiration.
Fantastic. That's what
Oh
we
my
want to
gosh.
hear.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. If you do have any other questions, Joanne will be here until we close or get ready to kick everybody out. So, but otherwise, I think there's probably still plenty to eat downstairs. So make sure you grab some and enjoy yourselves. And like I said, if you have any questions, Joanne will be here for one-on-ones if you want that. But otherwise, thank you for coming today. And remember, check us out on our Facebook page, website, and if you're not a member, please become a member, because it really helps support programming here, and it keeps you in the loop of what we're doing. So otherwise, thanks again, and we'll see you at the next event that we have. So thank you very much.